Now let's begin to turn the corner and apply this. Here's a Starbucks. They have made the wall almost entirely out of glass, though there's nice wood. Then do you notice that there are tables all the way out here on the street? So I'm driving by, I see the sign, I see the store, I see that the store spills out through the doors and through the windows, and comes right out to me. It's not difficult at all for me to go in there because they have purposely designed it to not be secretive. Now here we are on the inside, not of the same Starbucks, but of a Starbucks. Direct sunlight. You also notice some canned lighting. If they exist really to make money, then what's the cheapest kind of lighting? Well, it's fluorescent lighting. So does Starbucks use fluorescent lighting? No, they use these cans of incandescent light, yellow spots on the tables and on the floor. Somehow the canned lighting actually makes them more money than fluorescent lighting would. Well, you could probably imagine at this point why that is the case. Yellow light with darkness around it reminds us of a campfire, and we're drawn to it like moths to a flame. Blue-hued light on that end of the spectrum makes us feel self-conscious. So would churches do well, I guess would be the next question here, to find a third place? The first place is your home, and the second place is where you work. We all kind of need a third place to gather. Place that's not work and it's not home. It's where you're accepted and you're comfortable, and where you are socially involved with other people. Bars, pubs, saloons, they serve that purpose. Coffee houses also serve this need. Can you build a church building so as to fill this need? How welcoming do these places look? Kind of imposing, built of stone, no way of seeing what's inside. We like to build our worship spaces so that those who are inside have beautiful stained glass views, but people on the outside, as a matter of fact, might just be dead. Church building that has a lot of outside space, a courtyard, but is it very welcoming? Even the friendly country church, when you look at it, you realize nobody can see on the inside. Even the door itself is kind of imposing and keeping people out rather than welcoming them in. So Southeast Christian Church, they approach this and ask themselves, how can we blur that line of where the church building is and the public space? Well, the building itself has a lot of glass, but I'm particularly fascinated with the covering here. It's much more than a carport. It's where the building opens right up into the parking lot. Well, how we're talking about this, let's talk about seating arrangements and floor plans. What are the implications of how internal space is used? What does it say about God, about fellowship, about worship styles, about love, about sacred actions? Here's a church building. What's it say? We've got individual theater seating. We have non-liturgical looking stage. Could be a concert hall. Here is a church building that was redesigned. This is fascinating to me. It's a Roman Catholic church. Here, first of all, is the original design. You come in the entrance, and you see straight pews, straight rows of pews. You go a long way, and you get up near the front, and you see there's a lot of space between that and the altar. And over on the right side is where you find the pulpit, and eventually the baptistry is over there on the side room. The bishop's chair is over on the left side, and where the host is kept, what they call the tabernacle, is there at the apse at the back. Now, here's how they redesigned it. In the first place, you come in the back way, and the first thing that you see is the baptistry. It's not up front and over in a side room anymore. It's communicating something. It's communicating something theological, that we come into the church through the waters of baptism. It's not just a fountain for design, but it's symbolic. And then as we walk up here through the pews, we find that no longer are we sitting on uncomfortable pews in straight rows, but we've begun to put a circle to the whole thing. People can even sit on the other side of the altar is now among the people instead of being back at one end. That's a huge difference. And the pulpit is among the people. Well, that's saying something very different. The tabernacle itself has been moved forward. There are a lot of buildings, church buildings, that are designed and built in what they call a cruciform. Come in at the base of the cross. The apse is at the top of the cross, and then the baptistry is usually on the right side, and over on the left side is an oratorium or a small chapel. More evangelical approaches to buildings have people sitting more in the round, or at least in a fan shape. So we put the stage area in the middle, and on that stage we have all kinds of instruments and so forth. It's not filled with religious symbolism, but rather with instruments and with speakers and with drama, and people face each other. Now, some have been critical in those early days, back in the 1960s, when these kinds of buildings were first being put up, that they saw this as being an indication of humanism, that people were looking less at God's authority and more facing each other. And this is a bad sign for the health of the church. But in truth, when we go back to the very early church, we find that it was pretty much built in the round. In fact, people stood when they went to church, and they met in the catacombs, and so they tended to design their churches to look somewhat like the catacombs as well, sort of compromising that. We've got straight rows, but we also curve in some on the outside. Here's a stained glass window, huge and imposing, and made for illiterate people, really, so that they can learn Bible stories and learn truths from staring at that window during the preaching and during the assembly. This they call a rose window. Here's an example of a baptistry. Now, this is the building of Cane Ridge Meeting House. There's a bottom floor, top floor. The bottom floor is where the church met, and you see how they face in toward each other. And there's a table, and there's the pulpit. There would be a baptistry, but they didn't have one back then. You had to go down the river for that. The upper floor, then, is for African Americans. Barton W. Stone was a strong anti-slavery person, very much part of the abolition movement, and he actively freed a lot of slaves and was concerned that they would be introduced to Jesus. At the same time, society in Kentucky in the mid-1800s didn't tolerate whites and blacks sitting together, being in the same place, and so this was their compromise for the culture of their day. So again, I ask, where is the eye drawn? What does this say about the relationship of people with God and of people with one another? Since then, we've redesigned buildings. We put choir behind the pulpit, and we put people into straight rows, and we've invited them to come forward to come to Christ, rather than Christ being among us. He is at the front. Well, that's kind of an American approach to Christianity, and it's largely being broken down now. As a worship leader, I pretty much guarantee that in your lifetime, you will be involved in a building program. Either the church where you are is building a new building, relocating, or perhaps they're just redesigning their worship space, and they're asking themselves some basic questions. What do we want that space to do? What do we want it to be? Well, you don't want to just get a cookie cutter model from an architect. You want to think through it and be purposeful. So I hope when you have opportunity to be a worship leader or to somehow influence the space that you have, whether in a new church plant or a well-established church that is making some renovations, that some of these ideas will stick with you, and you'll say, there's a theological implication to every choice that we make. So let's make sure that we have thought through it so that it's consistent with our values and our view of ministry as a church.